You've heard about it in science. You've heard about it in spirituality. But you've probably never realized just how much it explains about your entire life. The observer effect sounds like quantum physics jargon, but it's actually the doorway to understanding why your thoughts shape reality, why your attention creates worlds, and why nothing in your life is truly passive. The moment you observe something, it changes. Not just in a lab, but in your mind, your emotions, your body, your relationships, your future. What you look at begins to behave differently. Not because it changes, but because you do. Now let's rewind to where this all began. In the early 20th century, scientists were running what looked like a simple experiment called the double-slit experiment. They shot particles through two slits to see how they behaved. Sometimes the particles acted like solid little balls, going straight through one slit or the other. Sometimes they acted like waves, rippling through both slits at once, depending on whether or not someone was watching. But here's where it got weird. The act of observing the experiment changed the outcome. If no one was watching, the particles spread out like waves, as if they were exploring all possibilities. But the moment someone looked, they collapsed into a single outcome, as if they suddenly had to decide what they were. That one moment changed everything in science, because it showed us that observation isn't passive. It's participatory. Your awareness doesn't just witness reality. It helps create it. And if that's true on the quantum level, where particles blink in and out of form, what does that mean for your thoughts, your choices, your focus? Could it be that the universe is more like a mirror than a machine? Could it be that you are not a spectator in life, but a participant shaping every frame with your focus? Let's go deeper. Think of your mind like a flashlight. Whatever you shine it on becomes more real, more active, more defined. When you focus on fear, fear expands. When you focus on love, love opens up paths. When you focus on possibility, doors you never saw before begin to appear. That's not just poetic. That's the observer effect in action. Not just in labs, but in your life. Think about how people behave differently when they're being watched. Think about how your body responds when you focus on pain versus when you focus on healing. Think about how you've changed simply by becoming aware of old patterns. It's not magic. It's physics wrapped in consciousness. Because you're not just seeing the world. You're participating in it. And what you pay attention to begins to align with your energy. Here's a simple way to visualize it. Imagine you're in a dark room with hundreds of floating mirrors. Each one reflects a different version of your life. One shows you successful. One shows you struggling. One shows you in love. One shows you alone. The mirrors don't change. But your focus, your observation, chooses which mirror you stand in front of. Which one reflects back into your experience. Your attention is the light, and the mirror responds. That's the observer effect at a soul level. You don't control every outcome, but you influence the field by where you place your awareness. You shift the probabilities by how you choose to see. And when you begin to really understand this, you realize that nothing is fixed. You're not stuck. You're not doomed. You're not limited. You're just focused on one version out of infinite possibilities. And that focus is powerful, because your life begins to bend around what you observe. If you're always looking for proof that life is hard, you'll find it. If you start to observe moments of peace, synchronicity, kindness, they'll begin to multiply. Not because you're faking positivity, but because you're opening the door for a new waveform to collapse into your experience. You're tuning the frequency of your perception, and reality starts to respond. But here's the twist. The observer effect doesn't mean you have to be hyper-focused on manifesting. It doesn't mean you need to obsess over what you want to appear. In fact, sometimes the most powerful observation is gentle, detached, even reverent. It's when you look at your reality not with judgment or control, but with awareness and compassion. That's when the deepest shifts happen. Because you're not just observing from the mind. You're observing from the soul. You're becoming the witness. And the witness transforms everything. You're not lost. You're becoming aware. You're not broken. You're changing the experiment just by seeing it clearly. Now let's talk about relationships. One of the strangest ways the observer effect plays out is in how we see people. Have you ever noticed how someone seems to become more of who you believe they are? If you expect them to disappoint you, they often do. If you expect them to grow, they often rise to meet that vision. This isn't just psychology. It's quantum. Your observation becomes a field that others unconsciously respond to. You're not controlling them. You're co-shaping the energetic space between you. And the more present your observation is, the more impact it has. When you observe someone with love, without trying to fix or change them, that love becomes a field of safety. And safety is what allows transformation. You're not just seeing them. You're holding them in a space where more of their truth can emerge. This is why relationships often improve not through pressure, but through presence. Because deep witnessing is the rarest gift in a distracted world. Now let's zoom back out. What about your future? What about all the things you haven't yet experienced? The observer effect says that the future is not set. It exists as probabilities, not certainties. You are a co-author, not a passive reader. And the pen is your attention. But most people don't observe the future. They replay the past. They stare into yesterday's mirror hoping to see something new. And when nothing changes, they say, "See, this is just how life is." But what they don't realize is that their observation is stuck on the wrong frame. They're not broken. They're looping. So what if you dared to observe a different outcome? Not as fantasy, but as a frequency. What if you started tuning your attention to signals of alignment instead of signals of fear? What if you became more curious than certain? Because certainty collapses possibility. But curiosity? Curiosity expands the field. And the universe responds to your vibration. Not your words, not your hopes, but the actual emotional tone of your observation. That's why forcing things doesn't work. That's why trying so hard to manifest can backfire. Because your true signal is stress. But when you soften into observation, when you gently begin to expect synchronicity instead of fighting for it, the field opens. Things show up. People appear. Paths unfold. Not because you forced it, but because you finally aligned with it. And this brings us to the real shift. The observer effect isn't just about creating new outcomes. It's about becoming someone who lives from presence instead of programming, who sees the world through clarity, not filters, who chooses where to place attention as a sacred act. You're not here to react to life. You're here to reflect something deeper into it, to become the light that shifts the mirror. So ask yourself, what am I constantly observing? What am I rehearsing with my focus? What am I energizing with my awareness? Because where your attention goes, your reality grows. That's not a slogan. That's the quantum truth hiding in plain sight. You don't need to master every thought. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to start observing your life as something alive, responsive, co-creative. And when you do, the world begins to respond in ways that feel magical, but are actually just natural. Natural to a soul who remembers its place in the fabric of reality. Natural to someone who stops trying to force the script and starts listening to the field. This is not a trick. It's a return. A return to what mystics and sages have always known. That what you see, you shape. That what you honor expands. That your attention is not neutral. It's the most powerful creative force you have. And you've had it all along. You've just been aiming it at your fears instead of your light. So what does this actually look like in everyday life? It looks like waking up and observing your own state, not to judge it, but to witness it. It looks like noticing your thoughts without becoming them. Like hearing the voice of doubt and choosing not to feed it. It looks like feeling a wave of fear rise and breathing instead of bracing. This is quantum mastery in motion. Not escaping the human experience, but moving through it with awareness. With attention like a tuning fork. You don't need to fight the darkness. You just need to shine differently. Observation isn't passive. It's directive. When you observe your body with love, your cells respond. When you observe your work with gratitude, it starts to unfold with more grace. When you observe your future with curiosity instead of control, you start aligning with timelines that were hidden before. This is not magic. This is physics meeting consciousness. But here's the subtle part most people miss. The observer effect doesn't mean you fake positivity. It doesn't mean you ignore pain. In fact, the deepest shift happens when you observe your pain honestly, without flinching, and still hold space for light. That balance is what collapses the old wave of suffering and invites a new particle of peace. You're not here to bypass life. You're here to bless it by how you see it. That's the real shift. Now let's talk about something even deeper. Your identity. You are not just observing the world. You are observing yourself. And every time you see yourself through a new lens, your life reconfigures. If you believe you're a failure, your mind filters reality to confirm that. Not because it's true, but because your observation demands it. If you believe you are healing, your mind opens pathways to receive that healing. Not because it's guaranteed, but because you've aligned your lens. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are a vibrational match for. And what you are is what you repeatedly observe. That's why change is so subtle and powerful. Not in the loud affirmations, but in the quiet shift of how you see yourself. When you start observing yourself as already whole, already loved, already connected, the universe begins mirroring that back. Not instantly, but undeniably. You are shaping your self-concept in every moment. You are sculpting your reality with silent attention. The mirror of the universe cannot lie. It can only reflect. So the real work is not to get more, prove more, be more. It's to choose more consciously what you see. And to see with love. That's what collapses fear. That's what opens doors. That's what changes everything without anything needing to be forced. The observer effect isn't just a theory. It's a portal to a new way of being, a new way of relating, a new way of creating, not from lack, but from essence, not from need, but from knowing. And the best part? You don't need to do this perfectly. You just need to do it sincerely. To begin watching with wonder, to begin expecting beauty, to begin holding space for grace. And life, being what it is, responsive, intelligent, alive, will begin to respond. It has no choice. Because reality isn't something outside you. It's something mirrored through you. And once you truly see that, once you stop just thinking about the observer effect and start living it, you begin to realize how powerful you always were. Not because you control the universe, but because you are inseparable from it. The observer and the observed, the wave and the particle, the question and the answer. And all of it begins in the space between thoughts, in the silence of attention, in the sacred act of seeing. And here's what's truly wild. Once you begin to live from this awareness, life becomes a mirror maze of synchronicities, small winks from the universe that you are aligned, that your presence is enough, that your attention is creative. You begin to notice numbers repeating not because they're magic, but because your brain is tuned. You overhear words in a coffee shop that answer the question you held in your heart. You wake up from dreams that feel like instructions because they are. The observer effect in consciousness means the more sincerely you look, the more clearly you see, and the more clearly you see, the more you collapse your old stories, your old timelines, your inherited limits. It is the opposite of efforting. It is the art of presence. It's the shift from, how can I make it happen, to, how can I become available for it? You don't push the river, you position yourself in its flow, and the river responds. That's quantum. This is not about manifesting the perfect life. This is about relating to life in a perfect way, with reverence, with attention, with space for the unknown. The observer effect teaches you that even observing the void with openness can change what it holds. Even your surrender is creative, especially your surrender. Think about it like this. In quantum experiments, the mere potential of observation was enough to influence outcome. That means even when you're not fully aware, but you start to soften your gaze, life feels it. That's why self-compassion works even when you don't believe it yet. Why gratitude shifts your mood even when things are hard. It's not fake, it's frequency, and you are the transmitter, the lens, the field. So ask yourself now, what are you observing most often? Your fears or your freedom, your lack or your love, your past or your potential? Because you're not wrong for seeing shadows, you're human, but the moment you choose to see differently even slightly, the shift begins, like adjusting the angle of a prism. Suddenly light refracts new colors, new choices, new energy flows, and people feel it. That's why some seem magnetic. They're not perfect, they're present, they're not forcing outcomes, they're aligning their observation with their essence. They are choosing what they want to reinforce, and letting life meet them there, not from control but from communion. And when you live like that, you become less reactive, more reflective. You respond from depth, not panic. You create from essence, not ego, and your world mirrors that back, slowly at first, then suddenly, because life always reflects what you are willing to see with clarity and care, not just once but over and over. The observer effect doesn't just change particles in a lab, it changes people, relationships, choices, destinies, and the more we understand that, the more we become stewards of our own evolution, not in a lofty way but in the small sacred moments, how you speak to yourself in the mirror, how you respond to the stranger who misunderstands you, how you witness your own pain without turning it into punishment. This is the quiet power of awareness, and no one can take it from you, because it was never outside you, it was always your essence waiting to be remembered. You don't have to master the universe, you just have to begin witnessing it with wonder again, like the child who sees magic in the mundane, who notices the sparkle in puddles, the faces in the clouds. That is quantum observation, not passive, but playful, and in that play your life begins to shift without you pushing, because now you are the field, you are the space, you are the love that watches, and in watching with love, everything changes. But here's the most beautiful part, the observer effect doesn't require you to be wise or spiritual or enlightened, it only asks that you show up, it only asks that you witness, that you stay with yourself, even when it's messy, even when it's silent, even when nothing seems to be changing, because in that witnessing something ancient begins to stir, something soft, something real, like touching the pulse beneath your skin and realizing you've been alive this whole time, like meeting yourself in the stillness and remembering you were never broken, just unobserved, just unseen in your own light, and once you see yourself differently you cannot unsee it. That's the sacred risk of consciousness. It invites you into responsibility, not blame but power, not pressure but presence, because now you know, now you feel it, every word you speak sends ripples, every thought you hold shapes the field, every moment you choose love over fear alters the path beneath your feet, and that's not a burden, it's a blessing, a gift so profound most people ignore it. They keep looking for control when the real power is attention, they keep chasing results when the real shift is in how you see what's here already. The observer effect means you don't need to fix everything, you need to see it fully, and sometimes that alone transforms it, like a wound that heals when finally acknowledged, like a child who stops crying once they're truly hurt. Your life is asking you to witness it with kindness, not because it's perfect but because it's yours. It's a co-creation, it's a dance between you and the cosmos, between your eyes and the unseen forces responding to them. So what if you started watching more softly? What if you treated every moment like a prayer, not to some god in the sky but to the field of infinite potential within and around you? What if you slowed down enough to notice the subtle changes, the micro shifts, the quiet confirmations? Would you trust more? Would you resist less? Would you begin to live from the space between thoughts instead of the noise they create? This is the invitation, not to change the world but to see it clearly, not to transcend life but to meet it in its quantum mystery, not to be more but to observe more consciously what you already are, and in doing so to collapse the false stories that kept you small, that told you you're behind or broken or unworthy. You are none of those things. You are the observer, the one who chooses where the wave collapses, and that makes you powerful beyond measure, not because you can control it all, but because you can meet it all, with presence, with love, with space for new outcomes. This is the real revolution, not in what you achieve but in how you perceive, and from there, everything else begins to shift, naturally, organically, quantumly, because life doesn't need you to try harder, it needs you to see truer, to look not through the lens of fear but through the lens of frequency, the lens of potential, the lens of quiet, steady witnessing. And in that lens your life becomes art, not perfectly drawn but vividly lived. You start to taste the colors, feel the texture of time, notice the pulse of possibility behind each breath, because you are no longer sleepwalking, you are awake and watching. And in that watchful stillness the universe starts to rearrange itself, not because you forced it but because you joined it, because you remembered that you and the field are one, and what you observe, you invite, what you love, you amplify, what you witness, you awaken, and what you choose to see now becomes the story you live tomorrow. So now you begin to understand that this is not about performance but perception, not about how well you do but how deeply you see. You could sit still and change everything without moving an inch, because energy responds to clarity, not effort, presence, not panic. You are not here to wrestle with the universe. You are here to remember you are part of it, just as the electron dances in response to the gaze of the scientist. So does your world reshape in response to your gaze, to your story, to your quiet attention? And that means you can begin again at any moment. Even now, you can soften your shoulders, breathe deeper, and choose to see your life with new eyes, even the hard parts, even the uncertainty, especially the uncertainty, because the unknown is the playground of the quantum, and only by stepping into it with trust can we meet what we've never imagined. This is not about escaping your human experience. It's about illuminating it, honoring it, walking through it with eyes open and heart present. Not trying to fix but to feel, not trying to solve but to witness. And as you do this, the world around you slowly shifts from static to alive. You notice the glimmers, the pauses, the poetry in the pain, the music in the mundane. You see that life was never against you. It was just waiting for you to watch it with new eyes, eyes not blurred by expectation or fear but sharpened by wonder. The observer effect is not a theory, it's a daily invitation to remember that your gaze is a sacred force, that your presence creates ripples, that your being changes the field. And when you hold that knowing gently, without ego but with reverence, you become the artist of your own experience, not by controlling every brushstroke, but by choosing what canvas you see, what light you reveal, and what truth you are willing to live by, not the truth others handed you, but the truth that emerges when you look deeply at yourself and finally say, I see you, I trust you, I choose you. And in that choosing, in that observation, something eternal awakens, something that was never asleep, only unseen, your soul, your frequency, your quiet cosmic signature, and once that awakens, the external begins to reflect it more and more clearly, not always instantly, not always obviously, but persistently, because your reality is catching up to your gaze, to your shift, to your clarity, and now your job is not to force it, but to stay with it, to keep observing with love even when old stories echo back, to keep choosing presence over panic, softness over striving, truth over performance, and with time the shift becomes embodied. You no longer have to remember it, you become it. You walk differently, speak differently, relate differently, not because you learned how to be better, but because you finally started seeing yourself as you truly are, and that seeing became your baseline, your compass, your home. And the world responded not to what you did, but to how you saw, not to what you said, but to what you allowed yourself to feel fully, openly, bravely. The observer effect doesn't just change your life, it reveals the life that was always possible beneath the noise, beneath the illusion, beneath the old programs, and now that life is rising because you are watching. And as you continue to watch with this kind of presence, something even more profound begins to unfold. You stop needing proof. You stop needing things to happen fast or in the way you expected. Because the shift is no longer theoretical, it's somatic. It's cellular. You feel different. You breathe with more space. Your reactions soften. Your relationships change, not because others changed, but because you're no longer projecting the old story onto them. You're no longer observing from the lens of wounds, but from the lens of wisdom. And that changes everything. Because the observer is no longer just looking out, the observer is also looking in. And when that gaze turns inward, not with judgment but with love, it becomes alchemical. You become the space where healing happens not by force, but by witnessing. You don't rush your feelings anymore. You hold them. You don't bypass discomfort. You listen to it. You become honest with yourself in a way that feels like coming home, not like confronting a monster. And that honesty clears the lens even more. Your inner world stops being a maze and becomes a sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, you observe the world outside, not with fear, but with clarity. Not with skepticism, but with a strange, quiet trust. Not a naive belief that everything will be perfect, but a mature knowing that everything can be used. Everything can serve. Everything can be seen and integrated and transformed. Because you are watching it all differently now. From the seat of awareness, not reaction. From the place of wholeness, not lack. You're no longer trying to bend reality to fit your needs. You're opening your needs to evolve with reality. And that shift makes life feel spacious again, full of possibility, full of subtle messages and signs and strange, gentle encouragements, like the wind nudging your back when you didn't know which way to go, or the right words landing in your chest when you were on the edge of giving up. That's not coincidence. That's coherence. That's you syncing with the field, not to manipulate it, but to dance with it. That's the observer effect at its highest, not just collapsing outcomes, but elevating timelines. Not just choosing futures, but embodying frequencies. And as you do this, as you live as the observer who also participates, who also surrenders, you become magnetic. Not because of what you attract, but because of how deeply you resonate. People feel it. They don't know what it is exactly, but they feel the calm, the depth, the authenticity in you. And it reminds them of something ancient, something true, something they forgot in their rush to be someone. And now maybe they pause, maybe they breathe, maybe they remember to look again at their own life with softer eyes because of how you are being. And that is how the observer effect becomes a gift. Not just for you, but for the world. Not because you fixed anything, but because you saw it. And in seeing it clearly, you helped it become new again. You helped it remember its own light, its own shape, its own potential. You didn't just change outcomes. You changed the container of perception. And from there, miracles are not forced, they're natural. Alignment isn't chased, it's inevitable. So now you know. You don't have to try so hard. You don't have to manifest perfectly, or affirm endlessly, or control every step. You just have to look with presence, choose with intention, and stay with love. And if you do, life will shift, not all at once, but consistently. Until one day you look back and realize the biggest thing that changed wasn't your circumstances. It was your relationship to them. And from there, nothing is the same. Because you are not the same. And you'll carry that shift into everything you touch. Not loudly, not forcefully, but honestly, fully, gently. Like the way light enters a room through an open window, not asking for attention, but transforming everything it touches simply by being there. Quietly, completely, and infinitely enough.